Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about section 7.8 on altitudes of a triangle. And really the only thing in this section is that new definition. So we'll just jump right in. By definition here, the altitude of a triangle, or an altitude of a triangle, is a perpendicular segment from a vertex of the triangle to the line containing the opposite side. So try to draw a picture of that. So here is my triangle, and there are actually three altitudes, one from each vertex. So if I go from A, I'll do my best to get that perpendicular. So the segment AX would be an altitude. It starts at one vertex, it goes to the line containing the opposite side, and it's perpendicular. Starting from B would look something like so. Segment BY is also an altitude. And there would be a third one that starts at C, goes over to the line AB, perpendicular like so. You'll notice they all go through the same point. That will happen. So these are the altitudes. And the reason why we call this an altitude is, from a certain perspective, if we're thinking of one side as the base, the way we measure the tallness of a triangle has to be perpendicular, right? If you think about how we measure the height of things, we measure height straight up and down, perpendicular to the ground, perpendicular to the floor. So this is like the height, but sort of a fancier word for height is altitude. So that's why we use that word. It's useful in thinking about base and height. Now, there are some details you do need to be careful with. So first of all, you'll notice that we said the line containing the opposite side. And that's important. Sometimes the altitude of a triangle does not actually connect with the side in question. So see if you can draw a picture where the altitude doesn't actually go to the side of a triangle, it simply goes to the line containing that side. And the trick here is you need an obtuse angle. So if one of the angles of this triangle is obtuse, so let's suppose this is DEF. If I go from D to segment EF, no matter where I put this, I'm not going to get a right angle. In order to get a right angle, I have to extend this line, extend segment EF into the line EF, like so. And now, on the outside of the triangle, I would be able to find an altitude like so. So in this case, the altitude actually lives outside the triangle. It's allowed to do that. It still measures how tall this triangle is. But it's like the triangle is sort of leaning to the side, so we actually have to be on the outside to drop straight down and measure the height. Second thing I want you to keep in mind is when we're talking about a triangle and we have a vertex, there are various things we can draw. We can draw an altitude, we can draw a median, we can draw an angle bisector. All of these things create a certain amount of symmetry, but they create different kinds of symmetry. Generally speaking, these are different. So you need to really know what the words mean. It's easy to think, oh, I'm drawing some segment in the triangle. It's a median, I think, or an altitude or an angle bisector. You really need to know. So in a case like this, let's see. So if I had this angle, my best guess as to the ray that bisects that angle looks to be like so. So here in orange would be an angle bisector. In green, I could draw an altitude. And the midpoint of this segment at the bottom appears to be somewhere around here. So this segment in black would be my median. They are 3 different segments. Each one is interesting in its way. Each one can be useful in a problem, but they're generally different things. Make sure you know that. Don't get sloppy. These words will get used often without a diagram. You need to draw the right diagram to make use of it. And then one last thing I want you to know is that this word altitude, much like the word hypotenuse and some other words we use in a triangle, can be used somewhat flexibly. The original definition is a segment, but sometimes we mean the length. So for example, if I have something like so, and I draw in an altitude like so, but I also tell you that that has a length of 5, what you might see is segment AD is an altitude. I can certainly say that. But what I might also say, depending upon the context, is the altitude is 5. So sometimes when I use this word altitude, I'm talking about the object. Sometimes when I use the word altitude, I'm just talking about how big it is. In context, you usually wouldn't get confused as to which one I mean. But do be aware, we are a little bit loose in terms of multiple meanings of the word altitude, although they are closely related. Okay, so that is it, and you can go practice some problems using this new vocabulary term.